Lord, Lord. Why? Jesus rejects people who did everything right. Jesus describes people who prophesied in His name, cast out demons in His name, did mighty deeds in His name, and He still says, I never knew you. If religious activity alone isn't enough to be known by Jesus, what actually is? Today's gospel gives the answer, and it's simpler and harder than you think. Matthew 7:21-29. Jesus said to His disciples, Not everyone who says to me, Lord, Lord, one will enter the kingdom of heaven, but only the one who does the will of my Father in heaven. Many will say to me on that day, Lord, Lord, did we not prophesy in your name? Did we not drive out demons in your name? Did we not do mighty deeds in your name? Then I will declare to them solemnly, I never knew you. Depart from me, you evildoers. Everyone who listens to these words of mine and acts on them will be like a wise man who built his house on rock. The rain fell, the floods came, and the winds blew and buffeted the house. But it did not collapse. It had been set solidly on rock. And everyone who listens to these words of mine but does not act on them will be like a fool who built his house on sand. The rain fell, the floods came, and the winds blew and buffeted the house. And it collapsed and was completely ruined. When Jesus finished these words, the crowds were astonished at His teaching, for He taught them as one having authority, and not as their scribes. This passage closes the entire Sermon on the Mount. Everything Jesus has taught about prayer, forgiveness, judgment, treasure, and the narrow gate builds directly to this final warning and parable. Prophesying, driving out demons, and doing mighty deeds were not fringe claims in the ancient world. They were the recognized signs of legitimate spiritual authority. In Jewish and early Christian communities, these activities were exactly what people pointed to as proof of being chosen and empowered by God. Jesus is not describing imposters with no spiritual gifting. He's describing people with real, visible, impressive religious activity and saying that activity alone was not what He was looking for. I never knew you uses a Greek verb, ginosko, that implies intimate relational knowledge, not simple awareness. This is the same word used elsewhere in Scripture for deep covenant relationship. Jesus isn't saying, I'm unaware you existed. He's saying there was no real relationship beneath the impressive religious performance, recognition without intimacy. Building on rock versus sand was a vivid, immediately recognizable image in the Judean landscape. Much of the region had seasonal wadis, dry riverbeds that looked like solid, convenient ground most of the year, but transformed into violent flash floods during seasonal rains. Building on sand wasn't a hypothetical bad decision in this climate. It was a real, observable mistake people in that region could have actually witnessed destroying a poorly placed structure. He taught them as one having authority, and not as their scribes, closes the entire Sermon on the Mount with a direct comparison. Jewish scribes taught by constantly citing other rabbis and prior authorities. Rabbi so-and-so says, Jesus taught directly in His own authority, without that customary chain of citation. His listeners noticed the difference immediately, and Matthew records their astonishment as the final word on the entire sermon. This passage draws the sharpest line in the entire Sermon on the Mount, the difference between religious activity and genuine relationship with God. The people Jesus describes were not lazy, uninvolved, or secretly wicked in some hidden way. They prophesied, performed exorcisms, did mighty deeds. By any external measure, they looked like the most spiritually impressive people in the room. And Jesus still says, I never knew you. Why would impressive spiritual activity not be enough? The answer is in the phrase right before it. Only the one who does the will of my Father. Jesus draws a distinction between doing things in His name and doing the will of the Father. It's possible to perform religious acts, even genuinely supernatural ones, while the actual posture of the heart is self-promotion, self-validation, or simply going through expected motions rather than genuine obedience and relationship. This is the single hardest teaching in the entire sermon for religious people specifically, not for irreligious people. Someone with no faith at all isn't at risk of mistaking activity for relationship. It is precisely the devoted, active, visibly spiritual person who is most at risk of this exact deception, performing for Jesus while never actually knowing him. Now the parable answers the natural follow-up question. If impressive activity isn't the measure, what is? Everyone who listens to these words of mine and acts on them, both halves are required. Listening alone is not enough. Hearing a teaching, even being moved by it emotionally, builds nothing. Acting without listening isn't in view here either. Jesus is not praising blind activity. The rock is listening followed by doing, hearing the actual content of his teaching and letting it reshape real decisions, real responses, real character. The storm in the parable is not a random detail. It's the entire point. Both builders experience the same storm. The difference between them is invisible until the storm arrives. This means the foundation question cannot be answered by how things look on a calm day. It is revealed only under pressure. A betrayal, a loss, a temptation, a crisis. That is when you find out what you actually built on. Common misunderstanding. Some people hear, "Not everyone who says, 'Lord, Lord,' will enter," and conclude this passage is about works replacing grace, that you have to earn your way in through enough correct action. That's not quite what's being contrasted here. The contrast isn't works versus grace. It's performance versus genuine relationship that produces real obedience. The wise builder isn't earning rock-solid status through effort. He is responding authentically to what he has actually heard and let take root. Another misunderstanding. People sometimes read this passage and become anxious, wondering if their own faith is real enough, constantly questioning their salvation status. That anxiety often comes from focusing on the wrong question. The passage isn't asking, "Are you spiritually impressive enough?" It's asking something quieter and more personal. Is what I'm hearing actually changing what I do? That's a daily practical question, not an abstract theological one. In personal faith practice, it's worth an honest inventory. Is church attendance, prayer, or Bible reading something that's actually reshaping daily decisions, or has it become activity that feels spiritual without changing anything concrete? The rock isn't built by the amount of religious activity, but by whether that activity is translating into real obedience. In facing a crisis or betrayal, the storm in this parable represents exactly those moments: a diagnosis, a financial collapse, a marriage in crisis, a friend's betrayal. This gospel is honest that the storm comes for everyone, regardless of foundation. The question isn't whether storms come, it's what's underneath you when they do, in leadership, ministry, or visible Christian service. For anyone serving publicly, teaching, leading worship, leading a ministry, even creating Christian content, this passage is a necessary, humbling check. Visible spiritual activity and genuine relationship with God are not automatically the same thing, and the gap between them can grow without ever being noticed until tested. In parenting, children learn far more from watching whether a parent's faith changes actual behavior under pressure, patience in stress, honesty when it costs something, than from any amount of stated belief or religious words spoken to them. A practical challenge this week. Pick one teaching of Jesus you already know well, something you could recite without thinking. This week, identify one specific situation where you can actually act on it, not just affirm it. That single act of obedience is rock. Agreement alone is sand. Jesus isn't impressed by how spiritual we sound. He's looking for whether what we've heard has actually become what we do. The storms are coming for everyone. That part isn't optional. What's optional is what you build on before they arrive. Listen and then act. That's the rock. If this teaching challenged you the way it challenged me, hit subscribe so you don't miss tomorrow's gospel. Like this video if it spoke to you. Share it with someone who needs to hear it. And tell me in the comments, what's one teaching of Jesus you know well, but haven't fully acted on yet? I read every comment. See you tomorrow in Ecclesia.